in March of 2020, there was a flash crash, and I was on the wrong side of the trade, and I lost the equivalent of my annual salary in 12 hours. And that's when I was like, okay, something needs to change because
Yeah.
this is not sustainable. Because at that point, I had one kid. I accidentally started my funding business.
Accidentally
I had like a
started.
close friend that needed money in a pinch, and I
Yeah.
made like 20 grand in my first month. And then I was like, wait a second, why don't I just do this more?
I'm going to edit that part out, Drew. Okay, that probably won't make it. King Show podcast. I've got Drew Haney with me here. Drew Haney runs a circuit. So if you're a land guy, you know Drew, you know his name. I was fortunate enough to have years ago via Buck Risby, I believe, brought you in he said, hey, I'm doing this group coaching thing with Travis. You got to come with me, right?
Yep.
And Drew came through our group coaching, and we were able to meet, and then eventually years later actually meet in person at one of his events. But Drew's got a lot going on. I'm going to say, Drew, from my vantage or perspective, dude, you're probably one of the most relaxed, like most chill investors in the space I've met. You know, most people are cranking, high energy, looking to grow, looking to scale, and you're kind of looking to like casually put in the least effort and make the most money from that. Is that observation right?
Yeah. So I don't know if I want to call it laziness because that has a negative, some baggage attached to it. But I was always the kid in school. I would calculate how much I needed to get on the final exam to either get the A- or the B-, right? Like what's
You're
the lowest
efficient.
grade very efficient. And then again, this is kind of a negative metaphor to use, but what's the Mark Twain character that had to paint the fence?
Yeah, I'm always talking about like procrastinating on purpose. So I don't think it's negative, to use. Right.
That's true. To me, it breaks my brain that I could set up a system. I don't even need to set up a system. I can cast a vision and pay other people to execute that vision,
Yeah.
right? And to me, that it just feels almost scandalous, right? And these people are happy to do the work. You're hiring people who enjoy, like my EA Kelly. She loves doing the stuff she does. She books flights. She like pays car insurance. She writes up contracts. She does all the stuff that I don't want to do. She enjoys it. I'm able to outsource something that I would procrastinate on. So right now, like I just actually cleared out my inbox, but like if the emails start to stack up and it's only emails that I can answer,
Yeah.
I'll almost treat it like a big science project where you just keep putting it off longer and longer.
Yeah.
And so I had someone submit a deal through email, and I had to apologize to her because I said, I'm so sorry. Like I dropped the ball. Usually I get back to people within 24 hours. And for her, it took me 2 weeks. I do have a really good excuse though. Like half of Los Angeles just burned down.
Yeah.
And I'm about a mile from the burned area. And so we actually had a significant amount of disruption here. And that did play a part in some of my delay.
Well, how terrible of you to leverage that for your procrastination, I'm just teasing. I do the same thing and it's even when I was in the workforce and had like managers, like I was a director of operations and I'd have managers reporting to me. And a lot of times if like you sat on people's problems, they'd send you an email with a problem and I would like procrastinate on purpose. And if you didn't answer it in the morning, by the afternoon, guess what? A lot of people would solve their own problems and they would suddenly become resourceful. Right.
Yep.
So I'm kind of that same way where I don't like to be driven by my inbox, right, or controlled by my inbox. So no, I can understand that. I can appreciate that. But a lot of people, honestly, like are hard charging, in their 20s and early 30s, even, right, where you're like you're hard charging. You don't. That's kind of a learned thing sometimes, right? So that's awesome that you're kind of already have that approach.
I think Travis, like on the whole delegation thing, I think I had a significant advantage spending my 20s in the Army as an Army officer. Because let's say you're a platoon leader, you're an infantry platoon leader, you have your platoon out in the middle of nowhere, you're looking for the enemy, and then you need to bed down for the night. And so typically a platoon, you're supposed to sleep in like the worst possible spot ever. Like the gully with all the thorns in it that the enemy would never want to walk through. That's where you're supposed to sleep, right? And so when you get to it's called a patrol base, when you get to the little camp that you're going to set up for the night, there's priorities of work, right? So the first priority is we need to make this place secure. So you check for booby traps, you set up your lines of fire, you set up your machine gun positions, and then the soldiers start digging foxholes, right? Well, me as the platoon leader, if I start digging my own foxhole right away, it means I'm not actually doing my job. My job is to stand on top of the hill, look out, look for threats, come up with a plan. And if I'm in there digging my own little foxhole because I want everyone to think I work really hard, I'm actually doing everyone a disservice and putting everyone's lives at risk because I'm not doing the right thing, right? So same thing as a business owner. If you're combing through spreadsheets and editing columns and formulas, you're actually hurting everybody because your employees are relying on the profitability of your business to work for you for multiple years, right? So if you're doing tasks that you should delegate, it's a disservice to everybody.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. And what you'll find is, like you said, there's actually other people that's kind of their area of genius, and it turns out they might even be better at it than you were. So like
Right.
letting go of it isn't like you're dumping it on somebody else. Like sometimes delegating, you'll actually find that people find better, more efficient ways, or if they enjoy it and have a passion for it, they're going to naturally do it better than you were because you were just kind of doing the minimal, right?
Right.
The minimum. So okay. So let's talk about that. So military, did you go straight into the military out of high school or college, or when did
So
you
I
join
did,
up?
yeah, I did ROTC in college. I got a full ride scholarship. And then when I graduated college, they commissioned me the same day as a second lieutenant. And then you go to more schooling to an Army school. And then about 6 months later, so let's say it's a 4.5 year program total.
Yeah.
Then you get your platoon. And then you're like, wait a second, I'm 22 years old. And they just put me in charge of 45
Right.
people. It's really effing scary. And it's
Yeah.
strange because your number two guy typically is twice your age. It's
Yeah.
usually a non-commissioned officer in his 40s. And so it's weird. The first year, it feels weird to tell people what to do,
Yeah.
but then you get used to it. And it's super useful as a business owner because now when I tell people what to do, I don't say it with hesitation.
Right.
I say it with authority, almost like this metaphor could come off as elitist, but imagine medieval times, you have a prince that was raised in the kingdom, right?
Yeah.
And that's all he knows. If that prince tells like a worker a project to do you think he's going to say it like with hesitation? No, like because he
Yeah.
knows he's the boss, right?
Yeah.
And so that's an advantage I had is in my early 20s, I got that uncomfortableness out of my system
Right.
and it just makes everything go much more smooth. And my
Yeah.
team knows right now. Actually only have one, but she knows like if she doesn't see eye to eye with me or if she thinks I'm off on something, she'll politely bring it up, and I'm totally happy being wrong because if I have an ego, it means my business makes less money, right?
Yeah.
And so if I set my ego aside and I can pivot when someone else identified my blind spot, I'm gonna make more money at the end of the year, right?
Yep.
And that's one thing I
Without
like about
question.
you, Travis. I've actually been through your program twice.
Yep.
I've paid twice to go through your program because I like the way you teach. You have no ego, and you really, I know deep down inside, you're in this game because you find it fun. You like to mentor others. You like to build up other humans, and that's why I'm here because it's just fun to connect every 6 months.
Well, and I'll share with you, you're meeting me in my 40s, right? So in my 20s, there's a lot more ego, right? You get
Yeah,
married, have some kids, you get some a built-in accountability partner to point out those blind spots, right? You know what I mean? So I would
yeah,
say along the way, it's definitely learned. The shedding that ego is something you become aware of, and then with time, right? Hopefully, you're not repeating every year, like hopefully you're growing, right? And I think for me that was a big thing to move from going, hey, in my 20s where I wanted my name on the side of buildings and airplanes, like literally that was the goal, right? To where I'm at now where it's more about, hey, how do I be time rich and spend that time with the people that matter most, in my
right.
life. So you kind of change where you're at, but it's always been, even when I was in the workforce, I wasn't aware of what was happening, but every time we had a new hire, like most people would dread it. And I really enjoyed training them up right and feeling like, hey, maybe I can like shortcut or save them some time through training. So every role I was ever in, I enjoyed the training aspect of it, not realizing that would set me up really well for, this type of work where I can kind of transfer the skill set, right, or wisdom to others. It's just impactful. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
just to have an impact in somebody's life is a great feeling. So yeah, no, I appreciate you you see in that, because that's why we've built this the way we have. It's again, to some gurus or people out there, they'd be like, boy, that's small or that's boutique, but it's by design. It's
Right.
intentional. Like, you know what I mean? It's because I want it to fit me authentically, like you with your business, right? Like you could go as crazy as you want with a capital company and a fund, right? But at the same time, at what cost? Is
Right.
the dog wagging the tail, or is the tail wagging the dog, right? You've got to kind of like go, okay, is this controlling me? All right. So that's what I kind of can appreciate for what you're building. You're building something intentional. And we were talking before we hit record kind of about you funding, having you started your own land investing company, built it up successfully, and kind of transitioned into funding operators deals. We were
Mhm.
kind of talking about you being selective and intentional about who you work with versus just saying yes to everybody to fund more deals, right? And I think that's similar.
I think you hit this point a few years ago. I hit this point last year where after you've scaled and you've made a bunch of money, you kind of hit this point where you're like, wait a second, I scaled, I did the right things, I followed the book, I made the money that they said I was going to make. Everything went according to plan. And then you're like, wait a second, I'm still not happy every single day. I'm
Yeah.
happy most days. And then you kind of have to go through, well, what is my purpose? What is like, is life all just about making money and scaling, or is there more to that? Right. And so that's when you hit the next stage, which I know you've been in for multiple years, where you start to give back and you
Yeah.
start to actually find so much enjoyment from seeing others grow and mentoring others. And it's really fulfilling because both you and I, as funders funding deals, we're usually coaching and mentoring along the process, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm assuming you're doing weekly syncs with, not with your flips, but like if you have a more complex subdivide project, even if you're just the money source, you're probably meeting with them multiple times a month, and you're building that relationship. And these are relationships that you're going to transact with for the next few decades, and you're going to see their kids grow, and you're going to see them
Yeah.
every few months at an event, and it's really really fulfilling.
Well, and that's where when we started funding, it was not like, hey, like this, from a financial perspective or vantage, this is more scalable than a land company or like anything like that. It was like I was helping people. They didn't have the resources. They wanted, you know what I mean? They said, hey, I got this under contract. Can you help me out? Put up the money, right? It made sense. So you start doing it because it's something that's needed. And then you understand as a business person, like, hey, this needs to be a separate entity, right? Like legally, this needs to be a separate entity and kind of siloed
Hmm.
from
Right.
our other businesses and stuff. So you kind of have to formalize it. But yeah, it started as something that people needed to help people take down deals they couldn't do on their own. And from the start, we at the time nobody was using the term. There was very few. I believe there was 3 other funders when I started, but it was, and that just speaks to how the industry's matured, right? But and grown and how many options there are. But when we started, everything was called like funding, right? And for us, we were the first ones where we wanted to say capital partners, Drew. And that was
Yeah.
more like just being intentional about like, hey, we don't want to be like your one-off deal. If like you got too big a deal for yourself to take down, come to us. Like, how can we build ourselves into your business and look at this as a partnership and be long-term? And we end up with 10 operators that are heavy hitters versus, 100 that are submitting one deal a year when it's too big for them to take down themselves. Yeah. And I think that's where, like you said, like kind of the whole like inch wide, mile deep, really,
Hmm.
right, approach versus the mile wide,
Right.
inch deep.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of value in, I don't know what your cuts are, but let's say for 40% of an operator's net profit, they get to outsource the most stressful part of the business, right? They're outsourcing a whole department and they have this metaphorical bell on their desk. And whenever they ring that little bell, money comes, right?
Yeah.
Of course, there's some discussions that happen, and I know you guys are very thorough with your underwriting, but there's a lot of peace knowing that, from an operator's perspective, knowing that they can run as fast as they want and their deals will get done. So they just need to find the deals. They basically have a marketing company and their deals get funded, and that's really nice to know.
Well, that was an epiphany for me. I've been on both sides of the fence, having like operating with my own means and resources and ending up with too much inventory listed and no capital in the bank, right? That's where I kind of realized, like, hey, to keep going like this, I'm hamstrung. Like, I've got to bring in
Mhm.
outside money. So it's not just a pitch, like as a funder, it's like saying, hey, as an operator, like this is going to limit you at some point, right? This, if you get any
Right.
good at acquisitions, you will run out of capital. You
Right.
will be limited, but you're right. It's like, I mean, it's rocket fuel. When I found other people's money, it's just complete rocket fuel for our business. Because, like you said, even when I was looking back at like QuickBooks and our P&Ls and stuff, and I'm like going, our number one expense was buying properties, right? And then a distant second was marketing. Well, when I
Mhm.
kind of moved to where like I quit buying properties, I used other people's money, and then our number one expense was marketing. That's a good thing if your number one expense is marketing. And like you
Right.
said, you become a marketing company and an acquisitionist, dude,
Mhm.
everything changed for us. And that, so that's kind of what I preach now too, is you're right. If you have, and don't submit your deal to 40 different people, it's like, try to build a deep relationship,
Right.
with somebody that you can rely on. That's not going to leave you at the altar, last minute, like a funder you trust, a capital partner. And it can be, man, it just can be absolutely life changing for your business as a, land operator. So before you were funding though, so bring us up to speed. So you're fresh out of college, you go into the military. How long are you in the military, and how does that overlaps, I think, with
No,
starting a
no,
land company?
I'm actually a little older than I look. I'm 35. So went straight in the military. I spent 5 or 6 years active duty. I actually left active duty from Korea. I was getting married at the time. I met my wife in Korea. She's third generation American, but she was a college professor over in Daegu, South Korea. So we got married. Then I spent 2 years full time day trading, mostly commodities.
Oh, wow.
And
All right.
I had a
This
ton
is
of
after
fun.
you're out at this point. You're out of the military and you're day trading?
Yeah, I had no debt, because I had free college, and so I had saved a bunch of money, and I was just trading with a small low six-figure nest egg. And then March 2020 happened. Actually, just before that, I had gone back to the W-2 world. I was an auditor at a finance company, but still trading. And
Yeah.
in March of 2020, there was a flash crash, and I was on the wrong side of the trade, and I had
Yeah.
lost about the equivalent of my annual salary in 12 hours. And that's when I was like, okay, something needs to change because
Yeah.
this trading thing is fun. I've learned a lot. I feel like I have a good pulse on macroeconomics. But if I just lost my annual salary in a 12-hour period, this is not sustainable because at that point I had one kid
Yeah.
and you got to start making more responsible choices, right?
I know. Unfortunately, when you're single and no kids, it's double down. Yep, double down again. Keep doubling
I
down,
know.
right? And then
You
when other people are involved and you got some responsibility, you got to be, dial back the risk taking.
you can't just be evil Knievel just jumping off jumps across the Grand Canyon with like a hoop of fire. So, anyways, I actually ended up making back all that money I lost. It took me 9 months. But then after I got back to break even, I actually stopped and I'm like, okay, this is enough. During that time, I went through this like little depression where I thought, is this it? Like I just commute to
Yeah.
my middle class job. I'm stuck in traffic. I listen to podcasts. Then I sit in my cubicle. I pretend like I'm being productive. Like, is this how I'm going to spend the rest of my life? Because I felt like day trading for me that was it. Like that was
Yeah.
the thing that was supposed to work.
Right.
And at least for me, it didn't work. I know other people are successful at it. And that's when I hit that like emotional rock bottom. That's when I found the land business. And I think Eric Wong.
Now, are you
He's
listening to podcasts at this time, or how did you like? You say you're
well,
commuting to work, so my story. That's kind of my story. I was like very similar to you, like kind of just like unfulfilled, with each promotion or title change, or even from the cubicle to the corner office with glass windows. It's just like still
yeah,
not fulfilled, not happy. And for me, it was commute to work where I became aware of it. Kind of by a Bigger Pockets podcast is how I became aware of it.
yeah. At that point, I was into real estate. I was into self help books. I was doing all of the foundational mindset books,
Yeah,
even though I had not found land yet. And I think to pivot a little bit, there's nothing wrong with being in the W-2 world if you're enjoying it. But if you look at the guys who are 10, 20 years ahead of you, and
yeah,
you look at that normal like pyramid type ascension, if you look at their role and you don't want to have their job, then why stay on that conveyor belt,
yeah,
right? So I was commuting to work, all butthurt because my plans of grandeur weren't working
Yeah.
out. And Eric Wong told me about the land business, and he showed me some of his flips in Castilla County. He's like, "Yeah, I bought this for 1,500, sell it for $6,000." And I'm like, "How is
Yeah.
that possible?" Right?
Yeah.
And Eric is actually connected with Quinn. I think they were in the same unit in fifth group
Oh,
together.
interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, so they know each other from the army, and I was roommates with Eric at Fort Bragg. So there's this whole like little military networking web, and the army is the biggest branch. So it's typically an
Yeah.
army officer who finds the land business. So, anyways, he tells me that he's like tripling his money on every deal, and I'm like thinking, there's no way. Does it? How does that make any sense? And he explains it, and then I'm like, oh, that does make sense. So then I went through Land Geek, and I
Yeah.
did exactly what they said to do.
Yeah.
I'm not out of the box thinker. I just want to follow a checklist, right?
Yeah. Well, follow something proven that works, right? Like a
Right.
system. Yeah. I
I
agree.
followed the system and it worked. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wait a second, this is crazy. So I just started doing it more and more. I think I did 35, 40 deals in my first year. I quit my W 2 auditing job about 15 months in. And I quit early. You know, a lot of the traditional wisdom, at least like the land geek coaches were saying that you shouldn't leave your day job until you have the equivalent of your, like I heard one person said I shouldn't quit until I hit 20K a month in notes. And for me, I was at like 7K a month or maybe
Yeah.
5K. And that was just such a far distance for me to travel. And so I left a little earlier than what conventional wisdom would say. And for me, that was a good decision because then I could pour all of my time into doing deals. So
I
I've been
remember
full.
that moment in my own journey too. And what was crazy is when you can 100% focus on one thing and all your time, all your inputs, all your energy, it's not split.
Yeah,
It's crazy. Like it blew up at an exponential rate, the
right,
business did because I could 100% focus on it and make it the main
right.
thing.
Yeah, and there's nothing like if you have a W-2, you're going to be loyal to your boss first because that's your main source of income. I remember the moment that broke my brain was I deposited three different checks in one day that totaled my annual income from my
Yeah.
W-2. And that's when I was like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Like I've been spending way less time on my land business and I made this amount of money. What would happen if I spent even more? Right. So I did the whole scaling thing. I did what the coaches said. It
Yep.
all worked. And then I accidentally started my funding business. I had
Accidentally
I had like a
started.
close friend that needed money
Yeah.
in a pinch, and I
Yeah.
made like 20 grand in my first month, and then I was like, wait a second, why don't I just do this more?
I don't
So I
have to
started.
talk to sellers. Right.
Right. I actually really, really enjoyed talking to seller leads and buyer leads, but it is very
I'm going
time
to edit
consuming.
that part out, Drew. Okay. That probably won't make it to the show. No, I'm just teasing you. That I enjoy talking to buyer leads part. I don't know if I can let that air, dude.
Oh, because you do realtors?
No, I'm just teasing. Just through man, how many phone calls I had, how many people with Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, right, selling it. The seller leads, I enjoy. I can handle that. On the buyer lead side, I'm like, I gotta delegate that. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, that is actually the first thing I delegated was a sales manager. Yeah, you just depending on the price point, you get some weird
right.
people.
Yeah,
Like one
isn't it?
person.
It's so hinged to that, like the
Yep.
price point or value of the property. The more interesting people are when I'm targeting waterfront lots, like these guys are fun to talk to. You're like, how did you come
Yeah.
about like owning this? Right? They got great stories. Or I feel like the other ones, it was like, you had to listen to hear about everybody's health problems and family problems.
Right. Yeah, I still have relationships. Like I'll still have seller leads or buyer leads like my photos on Facebook, and
Yeah,
you do create relationships that are like profoundly deep
yeah.
for the amount of time that you've spent with them.
Well, and it's a life-changing event for some people, like where for you it's just another transaction or just another
Right.
parcel. But like a buyer, I still recall a banker here in like Phoenix area that we bought this 40-acre parcel up in northern Arizona that adjoined state land. And he was buying it from me and he said, hey, I'm going to build a cabin on this and take the kids up there in the summer. And I kind of remember thinking, sure you are, because everybody's going to build a cabin, right? When they buy it.
Right.
I said, well, if you do, I said, dude, text me a picture. I'd love to see it. Right. Well, he bought a cabin kit, put it up inside of a year. He texted me a picture of him with his feet up, on the front porch of the cabin, looking at 640 acres of state land with his son right there. And I was like, dude, that's awesome. And for
Right.
him, that's a life-changing thing, right? That one purchase, that one buy.
Hmm.
So yeah, and we gave him a heck of a deal, right? So he got it for a good deal. But that part of it, yeah, you do miss those good guys, like those people that you
Yeah.
talk to, right? It's the is this still available? Messages and calls that you get that are like, oh, I don't know if I can
Yeah.
do any more of these.
Yeah, that could be tough. The thing I like about the business model is that it's I guess most business models are like this, but it's a business model where everyone wins, right?
Yeah,
Because people don't want the same stuff, right? So a seller lead wants liquidity. They want speed. They want you to take a problem off their hands,
yeah,
right? A buyer lead is willing to pay full retail because they want that exact piece of land
yeah,
because it's filling a certain need, right? So I took my car to CarMax. It was worth like 16 grand at the time, and they offered me $8,000 for it. And that's when it hit me. I'm like, the land business is not special.
yeah,
CarMax has been doing this for a long time. And I actually sold my car to a friend for the same price, knowing that I was selling to him at a discount because the check engine was on and I didn't feel like dealing with it. Right.
right.
So I'm happy. He's happy he got a discount. Everyone won in that scenario. And
Yeah,
that's what's cool about the land business is we buy from people who maybe we're solving a problem, maybe they don't want it,
yeah.
and we're reselling it to people who that's the perfect fit and they're going to build that cabin and create a legacy and create memories with their family out in rural Arizona next to a gorgeous mountain with probably $1 billion worth of gold in it, right?
Yeah, it's really it is a 3-win. I've thought about this before. We even thought of renaming the company years ago, 3 Wins Land Company, because it is a win-win-win. Like, people go, hey, we want a win-win situation. It's like, no, dude, there's 3 parties involved here, and it's a win-win-win. Like, you got the
Yeah.
seller who's bailing on something, getting cash. You've got the buyer, like you said, who's probably getting a heck of a deal if they're buying from us, right? And then we've got us who we're making profit trading land or pushing paper without having to hold or carry real inventory, right? Or deal with much hassle. It really is like a win-win-win situation. Of course, we're both a little biased here, but I think it's just a beautiful asset class. So you start you follow. Here's what I like what you said. Like, I'll get people all the time who inquire through us. They're like, hey, I've checked out these other programs. Like, how's your program better? Or right. And I go, well, almost everybody's program will work if you just
Right.
follow it and
Right.
just it's the whole
Exactly.
focus acronym, follow one course till success. If you just what happens if you start like mixing and marrying ingredients and trying to like take a little from over here and a little over here. So almost everybody's stuff is proven and solid will work if you can put blinders on and follow it, right? And I was
Right.
the same way as you. So that's great. You followed a system, you
Right.
successfully did it, and then what you kind of start running a hybrid of doing land deals and funding.
Yeah. So I was running two businesses at once for over a year, almost 2 years. And it came to the point where I realized that if I wanted to be A plus at one business, I needed to cut the other. And
Yeah,
so I chose to I actually sold off pieces of the land business to a player in the space, and the team went with him. And then I kept the funding business, and that's actually what. So I'm starting a podcast. Kendall's helping me. That's actually what I want to talk about on my podcast is what happens after you scale, what happens after
yeah,
you've made the money, what happens after you've done all the things they told you to do,
yeah,
and they all worked, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, like because I had too much time on my hands at that point, and I kind of went through this like early midlife crisis where I was kind of like, what's life all about, right?
yeah.
And that's kind of when you come to the conclusion that helping people is way more fulfilling than just sitting in your house by yourself, doing your own hobbies
Scrooge
and just
McDuck doing backstrokes in your piles of your vault
right,
of money.
right. It's not fulfilling. So that's kind of the journey I've been on recently
Yeah,
is realizing that I really, really enjoyed scaling both businesses. And I will continue to enjoy scaling my existing business and future businesses, but it's not like the answer to life's big
right.
question, right?
No,
Um,
I like you sharing that or being vulnerable because it's true, man, and it's kind of depending on what your goals are or where you're at in life or what you're dealing with, right? You have different takes on this, but even it's something I constantly have to kind of like tamper or put a leash on my ambitions because of when I understand, like when you identify an opportunity and you understand, like you kind of said, how to systematize it and figure it out, delegate it. And then for me, it's like, okay, now I can exploit this. Like once you see that opportunity, it's hard. It's really hard to govern that or throttle that or dial it back. It's been the same way with us. Like we all the time, we joke about remember when I was working 12 or 15 hours a week running a really profitable land company? But then I kind of got the bug of helping people and started coaching. And then we started that as a company, right? And that's a company
Right.
that helps
Yep.
people, but comes with responsibilities and team. And then same thing, we start funding deals, right? It comes with, more responsibility and team. And then we started a software company, which is a whole new venture, and then you've got support tickets, you've got staff, right? So there's
Hmm.
all these things where you go, sometimes like you want to do things because you want, you're capable and you want to prove you're capable. And then after you validate it, you want to scale it. But at the end
Right.
of the day, sometimes, and we always have these check-in points where it's like, okay, I did it. I did it. I proved it to myself, but like, is this what I want to end up with? Do I want to own a business with a team, or do I just want to be time rich? So I
Right.
think you're right to have those check-ins because we constantly like are having those conversations, my wife and I, and this year, she had a just kind of a freak heart attack, and it
Mm.
out of nowhere, super fit, and she had this heart attack, and it's
That
got
was
us
over the summer, right?
yeah, that was in 2024 Labor Day weekend. We were traveling up
Okay.
to Idaho for my son's travel baseball, and she's arm went numb, and she just felt like something was goofy. And all of a sudden, we're in the ER, and she's getting surgery and heart surgery. And
Oh, wow.
it really, it's really got us even now like reevaluating things to the point where you go, do we fold some companies? Do we let some go? You know what I'm saying? Because it's
Right.
like, yeah, if the responsibilities or obligations or stress had any role in that, boy, I don't want to continue
Right.
with them, right? So I think
Right.
you're right to like go, okay, what am I here for? At what point is enough enough? Because a lot
Right.
of people won't talk about that part of it, but I share that. I'm with you, dude. I remember getting to that point where I go, when I can buy myself everything, like even for me, gifts were no longer exciting. And that's kind of sad to admit, right?
Yeah.
Where getting gifts are no longer exciting because you're like, yeah, I could buy myself that, right?
Right.
That's a struggle, right?
Well, and my daughter, so there's this like TikTok. I actually don't have TikTok, but there's like a social media trend where you ask your kid, "What's your favorite thing about daddy?" and then let them answer, and then "What's your least favorite thing about daddy?" And my 6-year-old, I don't remember what she said for the favorite thing, but the least favorite thing, she said that she doesn't like when I travel. And that just kind of like hurt my heart,
Yeah.
because I don't even travel that much. I've probably gone 7 days a month, so 25% of the time.
Yeah.
But from her perspective, like that's a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so we're actually, because of the fires here, we're almost like involuntarily homeschooling our kid because her school is 2 blocks from
Yeah.
the burned area. And we're actually realizing like, wait a second, we can travel, like we can just keep this kid home and then she can come with me on my business trips.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're considering all these extra options because, Travis, that, and like the studies show, after your financial future is relatively secure
Yeah.
and your bills are paid for, and like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like your basic needs will be taken care of, every extra dollar after that doesn't add happiness,
No, it's
right?
diminishing returns, right? Like
Exactly.
you don't get
And so
any happier.
scaling is great, making more money is great, building something impressive is great, but as long as it's not at the expense
Yeah.
of like time with your family, because both my grandparents, like, I don't know how to say this politely, but they both died really slowly. And
Yeah.
so I got to witness like what the end of life looks like. I spent like 10 years going to their, like, they were in a very upscale retirement community in Chicago, and I got to see what the end of life looks like. And who, like, the only people visiting the elderly people in there is their
Yeah.
kids. That's it.
Yeah.
Their friends
Yeah.
are busy dying, their spouse is either busy dying
Right.
or divorced. And so it just made me realize, like, if I'm 80, let's say I'm 120. I don't want to limit myself, but let's say I'm at 120, I'm on my deathbed. Like, am I going to have regrets where I didn't spend enough time with my kids, right?
Yeah.
So that's just things I've been thinking about lately.
Well, and that was where I was at. I want to say I was like 34 or some 33, 34ish when I was traveling a lot for work out of town. And at the time, I don't want to have to do math here, but I had two little boys, right? Two young boys. And yeah, it hurt. Like it just, man, it was painful to have to go out of town and leave them, like you're saying, right? And I also felt like we wanted to have a third kid. But I knew my wife, I was leaving her to do all the heavy lifting while I was gone, right? So I'm like, I really wanted to wait to have that third kid until I was home. So I was looking at all these things to do. But yeah, it was painful to me to go out of town. I started to dread it, like, and go, how can I be? And that's kind of, I was asking myself, like, how can I be a participant in this like parenting thing and not just like a spectator, right? Who is doing it when he's home or when he's available, right? So
Yep.
no, I can kind of, I hear where you're at. Now here's the irony. Here's the funny thing. So I go full time. I start staying home. I'm always there with the kids. There's probably supply demand, right? There's probably too much of me at home.
Yep.
And then the kids go like, Dad, when are you going to go out of town again? And I
Yeah.
go, well, Daddy doesn't have to go out of town again. Like, and they're like, oh, well, we kind of like missed it. You used to always bring home like king size, like
Right.
Reese's peanut butter cup bars. And you'd always bring us home a toy. Like,
Right.
can you go out of town so you can bring home a toy now? So we were kind of, my wife and I were laughing, right? Because you're like, first you're feeling bad at leaving. And now they're going,
Yeah.
get out of here, Dad, so you can bring us home something. But it goes quick, dude. I've got my wife and I have a 16-year-old that's driving. We
Yep.
also have an 8-month-old, right? But
Yeah.
it's just like it's like two extremes or two bookends, but it moves so fast that time spent, you'll never regret, right? That time spent with the kids and those anchor memories doing things. So yeah, it's just so you just never get it back. And in the end, you're right, kind of it's really only family that's standing there
Yep.
with you anyway. So I think once you kind of recognize that, that's even with the work thing, like you said, looking ahead at where your colleagues are or even superiors that are 10, 15 years ahead of you and go, do I want to be there? Right? Is this something that I want? Just check-in points, right? Like along the journey, just kind of checking in with yourself. Cause we've even had that where like we had really good financial years, but it took 80 hours a week of work, or
Right.
inputs to get it. And then you go, that's not what I want. Right. So I
And
think it's good to kind of be introspective, because dude, the goalposts, like basically the goalposts keep moving, right? Like you just keep setting bigger goals and you never reach them.
And I do think so. Like for me, 2023 was a really good year financially, but it was a hard year for our marriage. And
Yeah.
then, as you know, 2024 was super slow, right? And so, and I got out of my land business, and so I had a ton of time, and my marriage is like at all time highs now, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it. I was thinking, is there an inverse correlation between like the amount of money you make and the quality of your relationships? And I think, of course, the answer is no. I think sometimes there's correlations and sometimes there's not. And so I do think that it's possible and achievable to have a season that's very fruitful financially and also fruitful in your relationships.
Yeah.
And then the question is, should we strive for that? Should we chase that, right? Or are you just chasing this like magical pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? And maybe like a rebuttal would be just live in the moment, and then you don't have to think about any of that stuff anyways, right?
Well,
So I don't know.
and that's
I'm
just it.
learning.
There's not honestly a right answer. It's unique and individual to you, right? How you're wired, what you're driven by, what does fulfillment look like to you? And that might be different for
Right.
somebody that's married with some kids versus somebody who's single. What makes them happy or what gives them joy, or really where you're at when, whole different things. Like, dude, if you're going to get let's say a kid wants to get a tattoo when they're 6, what's it going to be, right? Pokemon, Mickey Mouse, I don't know, right? But it's probably a whole lot different than when it's 26, right?
Right.
So it's just like where you're at in life. I think a lot of time kind of speaks to what's important to you
Yep.
and how big a slice of the pie chart priorities are. Your priorities kind of shift, but I think you're right to just be like introspective about it and then be intentional or deliberate, because I have that tendency to go like, once I get something dialed in, it's like, okay, like how fast can this grow and how fast can I get it there? And then you go, gosh, I don't even have to do this anymore. Why am I doing this? Right. But
Right.
sometimes you're just, it's how you're wired. So you've
Yep.
got to look at those opportunity costs because yeah, they're very real. And if you don't recognize them when they're happening, those, like you said, even like the marriage thing, right? Like I remember a time where I was working a lot, working a ton, traveling a ton, and it just more just felt like the whole two ships, sailing past each other situation. Like there's
Hmm.
no fractures in the marriage, but it's just like, is this traveling good for the marriage?
Right.
Is it making it
Right.
better? Like, and I just had to basically at that point, like say, nope, I'm done traveling, right? We're not going to do this
Yeah.
anymore. I want to be around. I want to be with you. Like, are we growing closer together or apart? So I think like having those check-ins and course corrects,
Right.
are
And
really
I think
important.
every generation, like, you try to get better.
Yeah.
So, like my grandpa, he did very well financially, but he was always gone. So he was
Yeah.
a professor at Northwestern University. He was a keynote speaker all over the world. He wrote books, and he was gone a lot. And so my dad grew up with a father who was gone all the time. And so what my
Yeah.
dad did to respond to that is he made sure my dad didn't have a super high paying job, but he was always there. Right?
Yeah.
He showed up to every single track meet, every single cross country race, and he was always there. And like that's one thing I really appreciate. But then I look at my dad's career and I'm kind of like, that looks a little boring. Like I want
Right.
to make a lot of money. I want to do big things. I want to take risks. And so like I think every generation we try to tweak it and get a little bit better. And we're not going
Yeah.
to be perfect, but if we can make slight improvements every generation and we can
Yeah.
stop some negative cycles, I think that's a huge win.
No, I think that's honestly the goal, kind of like building upon, right, the hand you were dealt and trying to be better or more intentional, about it. But yeah, that you want to know the ironic thing? You know what my dad was doing in the 80s? He was buying
He was
large
doing
acreage land, subdividing it, and selling it with seller financing.
That's awesome. That's so
That's
much fun.
no,
And I
isn't it? We never want to do what our parents are doing. When you're saying like your dad, it's just funny that like I would then
yeah,
like go chase houses for decades and all these other things, and then the irony of me ending up in land is crazy because I had an aunt and a dad who they weren't flipping small parcels, but they were subdividing large acreage and selling seller financing in the 80s. So there it was right in front of me, but it's like, dad's doing this. That's not that exciting, right? Like it's very achievable if a parent, is doing it.
right. That's awesome. I love to hear that. And you guys also like didn't you grow up on a rock quarry like
Yeah,
or
I
something?
so I tell people when I'll teach them the land business as far as being an operator, and they go, "Boy, this is hard work." Like researching markets, talking to sellers. I'm like, so I grew up in Montana, very rural. My dad's town has I think 650 people in it today. A small town. He was a sawyer, a logger,
Okay.
right? So I grew up in the mountains. That's the cool things for a lot of people. They go, that's like their dream. But I mean that was dad's office. So going to work with dad was like, you know, um, going up there with the BB gun and walking trails and logging roads while he worked. So yeah, I grew up in the mountains, grew up in Montana, but that meant a lot of work, like a lot of work. So we would get firewood. My summers were 7 days a week. We would get 4 cord of wood per day. So my dad and I, me being a kid, we'd head up the hill and I'd see like two grown men in a half-ton truck heading up the hill to get 1 cord or one load of wood. My dad
Hmm.
and I would have a truck and trailer, and we'd get 4 cord in a day together. So I grew up working a lot, and then kind of when the environmentalism, kind of the spotted owl and stuff, shut down a lot of the forests in the 80s, my
Yeah.
dad pivoted to quarrying stone and providing it to like home builders or
Okay.
masons, right? Masons who provide it to home builders and theme parks. So I went from like cutting and loading firewood to like lifting rock and quarrying
Yeah.
stone. So my perspective of like, my baseline for hard work is different. So
Yeah.
when I found, real estate, right, and kind of flipping paper and not doing any actual manual labor, I felt like it was the easiest money, I had ever seen.
Yeah. For me, I had a pretty like suburban childhood, Chicago suburbs. But then I joined the army, and after that, you're just thankful to not be shivering and wet in a forest at 3 a.m. Like it took me 10 years to be able to eat pesto again, because the
Yeah.
army has this one MRE with a lot of pesto in it, and just brought back like I wouldn't say bad memories, but just like unpleasant
Yeah.
experiences. Right now, I'm not shivering. My clothes are dry.
Yeah.
I just ate lunch,
You're
and
getting
like
soft, dude. You're getting
I
soft.
know. Yeah, it's all about perspective, right? How do you
Yeah.
frame things? It's not Seth Godin. It's who wrote the Gap and the Gain.
Oh, Dan
Uh,
Sullivan?
yeah, like Dan Sullivan talks about like it's about how you frame things, and
Yeah.
even like this comparison thing we do.
Yeah.
Like I don't struggle with comparing myself to you because I think there's enough of a age gap where like I kind of write you like if you crush me in a certain metric, I kind of write it off as like, well, Travis has an advantage.
You got a
He's
decade
like
on me.
right, he's got a decade, right? But let's say like Callan, who's almost the exact same age, or like Justin Pichet, they like crush me in a certain metric. Like it bugs me, right? And what Dan Sullivan says to do is you're not, you don't compare yourself to other people. What you do is you compare yourself to a previous version of yourself.
Yeah.
And so you measure backwards. So what was Drew doing 10 years ago? Well, I was 25. I was losing money on a rental house. I just got my realtor's license and I was like miserable at work with like a boss that was like pretty rough, right?
Yeah.
And now I work for myself. I could sleep in
Yeah.
however long I want. I could do whatever I want. We're about to go to Japan, Korea, and China for the next 70 days. And like it's about framing it and about perspective and just being grateful for what you have, right?
Yeah. It's
Like
such a good perspective shift and such a good book. When I came across Dan Sullivan, it's something I needed because I have a tendency, I don't celebrate wins. I don't stop, pat myself on the back. It's just move forward, right?
mhm,
And it was really good to have that perspective of kind of like look how far you've come,
right,
and acknowledge that and like enjoy that, embrace that versus just hard charging to the next thing. I think that's
right,
important more honestly, like more for like mental health and self-worth than I mean, you can plow ahead and go, okay, at the end, I'm going to look back, almost like a Arnold Schwarzenegger type mentality of like, I'll look at all these milestones at the very end. On my dying days, I'll look back and celebrate myself. But for now, I've got more to accomplish. But
yeah,
I think like it sounds great, but for mental health, like, and well-being, I think it's a much better approach to kind of like take a
right,
minute, like you're saying, and kind of go, compared to where I was a year ago, compared to where I was 3 years ago, 5, 10 years, like
right,
I feel pretty good about it. And then also he talks a lot about like kind of stretching out that success of like the next 25 years looking forward. Different book of his, but like, having a 25-year outlook ahead. And when you kind of
right.
judge yourself on that longer time horizon, there's a little more grace, right?
Yeah, just comparing yourself against yourself. I mean, what I used to do, which is really toxic, is I used to compare myself to the most successful person I knew personally,
Yeah.
which for me is a college buddy. His name is Garrett Lord. He's the founder of Handshake. It's a company valued at 3.5 billion. And so he had similar background, same age as me,
Yeah.
same college degree, and he's literally 1,000 times wealthier, right?
Yeah.
If you do that to yourself, you're never going to be satisfied and you're never going to be happy. Yeah, look at yourself 5, 10 years ago, and like things are probably going to be pretty good.
Yep. No, I agree. And I don't know, maybe some people carry that their whole life. I felt like somewhere in like my mid-20s, I shed that, or by 30, I certainly was no longer even concerned with anybody I went to high school or college with, you know what I mean? Like, or even
Yeah,
tracking where they're at. And like you said, it
right.
kind of became a game of measuring myself versus comparing, right, to
Yep.
others. So yeah, dude, comparison with anything, like comparison, envy, those things that we kind of joke. We were walking out. This was several months ago, and I come walking out my driveway, and my neighbor's got a Cybertruck, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"What the heck? Why does he get a Cybertruck?" Kind of joking with my wife.
Right.
And she's like, "Thou shall not covet thy neighbor's Cybertruck," right? But
Yeah.
it was like I was pretty happy with what I had till I saw he had a Cybertruck. So I think
Right.
like that comparison thing or that envy thing always like
It's the
sneaks
thief of
in.
joy.
Yeah, it can rob you, absolutely rob you of
Hmm.
joy. I even our boys, I talk to them about that because growing up for me, man, we didn't have YouTube, right? We didn't have internet for me. And the comparisons were more locally, right? So you might compare yourself as an athlete to the best kid in your high school or the best kid in your state. But these kids now, they can jump on YouTube and they're looking at like the top
Right.
5 prospect in the whole nation in
Right.
their sport. And that's like their measuring stick.
Yep.
Right. And you go, boy, that's not healthy, right? To be looking at that. So it's more about like, let's set your goals and let's put in the work every day and check where you're at a quarter from now, a year from now, versus like looking at this freak athlete, right? Who at 12 years old is dunking, right? Doing windmill dunks or
Right.
something.
Yeah, I'm actually doing this book right now called The Anxious Generation, and it basically talks about how social media is literally rewiring kids' brains
Yeah.
and like in a very bad way. And comparison is just one category of how toxic it can be. And one thing that's nice about having the job I have and having kids that are potentially going to be homeschooled is like if they're in some sort of social group where having a smartphone and being on social media at a young age is the norm, we can
Yeah.
just remove them from that. We
Yeah.
could we could just move to rural Montana
Yeah.
and start over, and they don't know any better. Like, and they can spend their time getting chicken eggs out of the chicken coop every morning
Yeah.
instead of scrolling TikTok, right?
Yeah, well, that's the
So
nice thing too. Like you said, with how you've architected or designed your life, you have choices, you have options, and I think in addition to like just having time rich, having more time, that's the thing that money does bring, right? Is options.
yeah,
You have those options to go on vacation, like you guys are going to go for where you want for as long as you want.
yep,
I don't know how much better the vacation would be if you made a couple million more a year. Probably not that much better. You know what I mean? You're probably going to
right,
not eat that much better food, stay at that much better places if you're making
no,
10 million versus one or two. But I think it just gives you enough above what you need to live. It just gives you some options that a
hmm,
lot of people don't enjoy, or or
well,
aren't privileged to because they haven't put in the work to build what you've built.
I mean, I had this moment. I was in Dubai with an old college friend in October, so 3 months ago, and we were eating the best sushi in the entire world at the top. It was like a rooftop restaurant overlooking the whole city. We were on the palm, like that man-made palm tree thing they have.
Yeah.
We were on the palm, and I remember thinking like I've eaten like really bad army food in a foxhole
Yeah.
in like North Carolina at 4 a.m. and been just as happy.
Yeah.
And it actually empowered me to realize that I feel like I found the cheat code to being happy in
Yeah.
life is realizing that like more luxury does not equal more happiness. It's just a state of mind and it's a choice
Yeah.
every single day, right?
Well, and it's my wife and I have talked about this a lot. Like we've been happy in a 1,200 square foot starter home. Like
Yeah.
we've been happy in every city we've lived together. We've had a good marriage. We've been happy, and at every income bracket that we've been at, like you know what I mean. So I wouldn't say we're happier. The more you
Right.
have, like you have access to more, you can put your kids in more, you can do more. But it's like as far as like a measuring happiness thing, no, like we're going to be happy, wherever you put us, right?
Yeah.
We're going to make the best of it and be happy. And I think that's the thing some people miss is thinking that it's going to change, right? It's going to change everything. It's not going to change everything. It's going to kind of amplify what you already were, you know?
Yeah. One interesting thing I've found is, and this is totally a first world problem, and I don't think you're struggling with this because you guys are very rooted where you're at. But when you have homeschooled kids and your income is not tied to a location,
Yeah.
you actually have too many choices, right? It's like the paradox of choice, where like the concept is if you walk into an ice cream shop and you only can choose between chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry,
Yeah.
versus if you have 31 choices,
Yeah.
you will be more satisfied with choosing chocolate,
Yeah.
vanilla, or strawberry than choosing like blue moon, and then you're like, maybe I should have gotten the cappuccino
Right. I should have
flavor,
the
right?
cotton candy explosion.
I
Yeah.
know, that bubble gum.
Yeah.
So we're actually going through that right now, where we have actually come up with 5 different scenarios where we've talked about moving to Moldova, which
Yeah.
is the poorest country in Europe. We've talked about moving to Saudi Arabia, South Africa. We've talked about, like, my father-in-law has a luxury fifth wheel RV, and he has the pickup truck to pull it. And so we could like full-time travel across the United States
Yeah.
indefinitely. And it's there's just too many options. And
Right.
it's kind of interesting. This is like totally a first world problem to
Yeah.
have, but we're going through it and we don't know what we want to
Yeah.
do. And now with the fires here and they're saying the air is toxic and the water is
Yeah.
toxic, it's like maybe we do leave. I don't know. we're
Well,
not sure.
I'll give you some good spots in Montana to go get back to the
Yeah.
basics if you're looking.
Yep. I love it.
Awesome, dude. Hey, well, I've appreciated kind of getting to visit and not just a heavy focus on flipping parcels, but getting to talk real life stuff.
Mhm.
Congrats though on your although like I said you're building it intentionally at the same time. Like it or not, Drew, dude, you own a legit business and you're doing well. So
Yep.
congrats to your success, but also congrats to like building a authentic like business built around your personality and your lifestyle. Yeah. So when you get your podcast up and running, send me an invite. I'd love to be a guest on it. And then also get
Hmm.
me any links we got to get. I'll throw them on the episode webpage. So if people want to check out this episode
Yeah.
webpage, we can link them over to you. How should people connect with you right now if they want to?
Yeah, you can go to my website. It's drew-haney.com, drew-haney.com, or you can email me, drew@drew-haney.com. So there's a link on my website to get on my calendar. Also, we have the second annual Supercars and Land Investing coming up. And Travis, I know you're one of the panelists. And Travis, you were busy last year, so you had to leave pretty quick. But what did you think about the event, and what kind of can you share with the listeners if they should attend, if it would be a good fit for them?
Absolutely. Well, the event that you and Peter are hosting is, I think, it serves a much needed gap, in the industry where we're most of us are virtual land investors. So I think people kind of crave that ability to meet up in person because so many of these like house investors they get to just go to their local meetup because they're investing in their local zip code or their local city. But like, you might be living in Nebraska and investing in Colorado land, right? So the thing with land investors are so virtual. What you guys are doing, putting together like an in-person event, gives people an opportunity, right, to network with each other in an environment that isn't like that kind of isn't that selling from the stage,
Right.
the right, you know what I mean, like the seminar type of thing. It's truly more of a meetup and getting to know people, getting to meet them in the flesh. So yeah, I love it, and I think it's only gonna grow. So people should definitely check that out. We'll link to that too, Drew. But I know last year you guys were like, oh, it's your first one, and then you ended up selling out, and it was like
Hmm.
standing room only.
Yep.
So congrats to that. I think that's a great thing to bring people together and to connect people. And then also you guys, where you're doing it in Golden, Colorado, where you've got supercars, people get to drive Lambos. Like, I mean, come on, like that's a pretty shiny lure,
Yeah.
to attract the big fish. So I love it. And I appreciate getting an opportunity to speak at it. For us, schedule is always the issue because I've got three boys playing two
Yep.
travel sports. So it's like, man, the calendar for me, it's like it's a moving target. And a lot of times I don't have more than a month or 6 weeks. I don't know my schedule for, till 4 to 6 weeks before. So it's always tricky, but it was
Yep.
awesome to get out there in person. And get to meet you and get to meet Peter, and then a lot of other people that I've known, and even had people in my mastermind and community that we had kind of said, hey, I'll be there. You guys should get a ticket and come to it, So I was able to meet a lot of people that I've been coaching or been in our community for years and never met in person.
Yeah, our vision is that it becomes an annual meetup where people, they're not coming for the speakers, they're not coming for the supercars, they're coming to see each other, right?
Yeah.
The dates, it's June 27th and 28th,
Okay.
2025. And the website is milkhoney.land.
Milkhoney.land. All right. And I'll link to that too. And then you'll send out email broadcasts and stuff. So we'll make
Awesome.
everybody aware of it. But yeah, definitely if you're going to do any event in person this year, that's the one. I was just amazed how many people that I saw there. Right. So that's kind of your one event to kind of to catch enough people in one shot. You know what I mean? Like, because it's
Hmm.
neat. It's not like that feel of others where it's like, so like, there's all these like educational like camps that it's almost like, hey, you're not allowed to be in this community if you're in that community, right? The nice thing with you guys is almost like non-denominational, right? It's like
Right,
agnostic. Like
right.
we had people from everywhere that I recognized and saw there, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm excited to see everyone again.
All right, Drew. Hey, man, appreciate you. Appreciate your time, and that was a fun conversation, man.
Thanks, Travis.
All
See
right,
ya.
all right. See you. Thanks for tuning into The King Show. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Also, don't forget to head over to travisking.com for show notes, resources, bonus content, and more ways to connect with me and the guests that you hear on the show. Remember, greatness is already within you. It's time for you to boss up and claim it. Stop building someone else's empire and start building your own.